slicing it, categorizing it, thinking about its meaning, thinking about how much it costs, thinking about how much you can sell it for. You're just supposed to be contemplating this object, trying to clear your mind of any extraneous thoughts that might distract you, and focus all of your attentional resources on this one object. The general idea behind contemplation is that the essential knowledge of things is obtained not through thinking but through perception. Okay, you're not supposed to be thinking about the object. You're supposed to just perceive it for what it is. So that's the first and basic characteristic here. Dijkman then further classified this contemplative process into two phases, one that is characteristic of novice meditators and one that's characteristic of expert meditators. In the initial phase of meditation, what Dijkman called active contemplation, what you're supposed to do is simply try really hard to exclude all external and internal perceptions from consciousness except those that you're supposed to be focusing on. In his argument anyway, even the kinds of breathing exercises that most meditation traditions teach, focus on your breathing, don't think about anything else but your breathing, and so on and so forth, is really just a way of kind of diverting the person's attention from various kinds of extraneous thoughts. What Dijkman noticed, or what he thought he noticed anyway, and I think he was probably right about this, was that you don't do that forever. That at some point you achieve a phase of what he called full contemplation, where you no longer have to try so hard to contemplate the object of contemplation, your mantra or your breathing or whatever. It just comes naturally. It's become habitual. It has become, in terms that you were now familiar with from earlier in class, automatized, okay? And so you don't have to try to contemplate anymore. It just happens. It's become a habit of mind. And at that point, the person's experience is no longer that of actively contemplating an object, or trying hard to contemplate an object. Rather, it just happens for them. So what do you get for this? What you get is what Dijkman, remember, this is before there were any scientific investigations at all. This is more like the kind of clinical study a psychiatrist would do, a shift from what Dijkman called the action mode of experience to what he called the receptive mode of experience. The action mode of experience is what we're in most of the time, in his view. It's involved with the active manipulation of the environment. I've got to drive my car. I've got to get to the office. I've got to do these things. There's a lot of increase in muscle tension because you're actually engaged in lots of behaviors. Your attention is focused on the tasks at hand. You're trying to think logically and rationally about what's going on around you. And there are clear, firm boundaries between you and whatever it is you're perceiving or thinking about. That's quite different from the receptive mode that skilled meditators appear to enter into as a product of the meditative tradition, moving from the active manipulation of the environment to the passive experience of the environment. Let it be, okay? Don't try to do anything with it. Instead of increased muscle tension, decreased muscle tension. Instead of focusing your attention on the various things that you have to deal with, somewhat paradoxically, you enter into a kind of diffuse state of attention where you're really not paying attention to anything at all, okay? Because again, to pay attention to something would eventually create a boundary between yourself and the object of attention. Thinking in meditators is not illogical, Dijkman argued. It's simply illogical. The rules of logical rationality have been suspended so that a riddle, what in Zen is called a koan, like what is the sound of one hand clapping, or if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him, instead of saying, geez, what the hell does that mean? Okay, instead say, oh, I understand what that means now. And then finally, the perceiver feels a blurring of this boundary between himself and the rest of the world. Again, in Dykman's terms, the shift here is from doing things, which is what we're doing most of the time. You're taking notes, you're thinking about the exam you're going to have in your next class and so on, to just kind of letting things go and letting things be. So I don't want to spend more time on Dykman now. There's more on him in the lecture supplements, and his writings on meditation are really quite beautiful. He's a very skilled writer, and he has a clinician's kind of mastery, ability to convey what other people's experiences are like. Moving from that kind of literary description of the meditative state to something else, a group of investigators have recently done a brain imaging study of meditation that's quite interesting. And what they were particularly interested in was comparing the sustained focus of the practice of meditation with various kinds of mind wandering. And their idea is that meditation kind of goes like this, right? That you focus your attention for a while, and then you kind of get tired of that, your mind wanders, then you become aware that your mind has wandered off to your date on Friday or your exam tomorrow or whatever, and then you, after you become aware of it, you then shift your attention back to this thing that you're supposed to be focusing on. And what Hassenkamp and her colleagues did was not simply to have people actually meditate in a fMRI machine in a magnet and kind of watch what happens to their brains. This is just some figures here. So what you're looking at in green are the areas of cortex that are particularly active when the person is aware of things, as opposed to being aware of mind wandering, as opposed to just mind wandering. So once you notice that your mind is wandering, you get these activations, okay? And then when you shift your attention, try to refocus your attention, then you see more, you get activation in different areas. When you're focusing your attention, again, activation here in the frontal cortex. And when your mind is wandering, you get activation in these areas, what we described last time as the default mode network in the brain. So this is a kind of a study that has been done by cognitive neuroscientists to try to explore what goes on in meditation. Here's a figure. This is from a very recent issue of Scientific American that kind of plots out these changes very nicely. You can look at that for yourself. So other things I want to talk about. Okay. Cognitively, what's supposed to happen as a result of meditation, whether it's yoga meditation or Zen meditation or any other kind of meditation, is what Dykman called the de-automatization of thought, which he defined as kind of a reorganization of the way in which we think about various kinds of things. He argued that when in the ordinary course of everyday living, we approach the world through a set of cognitive filters known as the schemata, plural of schema, that we kind of apply automatically and unthinkingly. And what Dykman argued happens as a result of sustained practice in meditation is that these schemata, these habitual ways of thinking, get suspended. That's the de-automatization of thought, so that the individual meditator comes to look at him or herself in new ways, comes to look at the world in new ways as well. Now, in 1966, when Dykman was writing this, a classic kind of clinical analysis of meditation, that was all, it just kind of had this kind of verbal description of what de-automatization might look like. But now, since the achievements of the 1970s and 80s in cognitive psychology that I described earlier in the semester, we have a formal concept of automatization. We know what it means to invoke an automatic process. Automatic processes are inevitably evoked by the appearance of various stimuli or thoughts. They are, once they're evoked, they're incorrigibly completed. They run to completion in a kind of ballistic fashion. Can't do anything about it. They are effortlessly executed in the sense that they don't consume any cognitive resources. They allow for parallel processing, and that because they don't consume cognitive resources, they don't interfere with other ongoing cognitive tasks. And, as I remarked earlier in the course, these automatic processes operate unconsciously in the strict sense that we're neither aware of their operation nor can we engage in any voluntary control over them. Some processes are automatized innately, like reflexes or instinctual behaviors in non-human animals, for example, or they can be acquired through practice. And as you know, one of the classic examples of automaticity is reading and the Stroop effect. People can't help, skilled readers can't help but read and decode the words that they're reading, and when you're asked to name the color of the ink in which a color word is printed, there's interference between the meaning of the color word and the color in which it's printed, which leads you to ask, well, can we use now this technical definition of automaticity, inevitable evocation, incorrigible completion, efficient execution, parallel processing, and all of that, to kind of study the meditators and determine whether, in fact, meditation produces a de-automatization of thought. Is it possible for us to gain conscious awareness of and conscious control of processes previously thought to be automatized and running off kind of autonomously? That is one of the goals of meditation in both the yoga tradition and in the Zen tradition, to think about things in new as opposed to habitual ways. Okay, so the question that gets raised by Deichmann in his early analysis and by later analyses as well is, can, in fact, meditators do something by virtue of meditating to overcome the automatization of perception and memory and thought? Now, as soon as you start talking about studying meditation, you encounter a number of methodological problems, okay? One of these is that if you want to study meditators, you got to go out and get some meditators, and most of those meditators are people who are members of particular religious traditions. You want to study Zen meditation, you got to talk to Zen Buddhists. If you want to study yogis, you got to talk to Hindus or Jains or whatever. But the principal problem here is that it's very difficult to find people who are not already meditating who are willing to engage in meditation. You can't just kind of grab sophomores out of an introductory psychology class and recruit them for a study of meditation, because they may not wanna. Let's just be blunt about it. It's as if you could kind of randomly select college sophomores and say, okay, we want you to go to communion in a Catholic church. Can't do that exactly. So what you're doing